few years ago, we rented a camper van and traveled through Italy for the very first time to experience what it would be like to RV overseas. It ended up being one of the most unique trips we've ever taken, but it also came with a lot of pre-planning and a few surprises along the way. By the end of that trip, we said if we ever came back to Italy, we'd probably do it differently.
Overall, it's been an experience campervanning in Italy. I think we would prefer to fly into a major city and then take a train and really explore that way.
Well, we came back. And this time there's no RV, no campsites, and no driving. Just trains, vacation rentals, and lots of exploring on foot, and a completely different way to experience Italy. This trip started with a short flight into Chicago O'Hare, where we were connecting on our way to London and eventually Venice. At least that was the plan. What was supposed to be a pretty normal travel day quickly turned into a much longer one. Our first delay was about 2 hours, which seemed manageable, but by midnight that delay had turned into almost 20 hours. So instead of waking up in Italy the next day, we were right back at O'Hare trying this flight all over again. The good news was the airline was able to bring in another plane for the trip across the Atlantic, and after losing nearly a full day of our Italy trip, we were finally on our way. By the time we landed at Heathrow, we still had one more transfer ahead of us, so we grabbed lunch at the airport, stretched our legs, and waited for the final flight to Venice. After all of the delays, seeing Venice out of the plane window felt like a huge relief. From the airport, we took the bus into the city, which was a pretty simple way to get from the airport to Venice without having to figure out a water taxi or private transfer. Once the bus dropped us off, the reality of walking around Venice with luggage set in pretty quickly. We rolled our bags through the streets, made our way towards the bridge, and got our first real look at the city. Even though we were exhausted from the travel delay, this was the kind of view that made us stop for a moment to take it all in. The canals, the boats, the old buildings, and the water running through the city, it's just one of those places that doesn't feel like anywhere else. We followed the water for a bit, then turned down a small alley to find our vacation rental. This ended up being the nicest place we stayed during the entire trip. The only downside was that because of the delay, we only got to spend one night here. So with our time in Venice cut in half, we dropped off our bags and looked over the map from our host, then headed right back out. Just outside our rental, we crossed another small bridge and started wandering. The maze of streets led us past churches, canals, quiet corners, busy walkways, and narrow alleys that seemed to open up to the canals just out of nowhere. That's one of the things that makes Venice so interesting. You can be walking through a tight alley with no idea where you are, and then all of a sudden you're standing at the edge of the water with a completely different view of the city. Since our time here was so limited, we kept things simple. No big checklist, no rushing across town to see everything. Just walking, taking in as much as we could, and grabbing a few slices of pizza before calling it a night. The next morning arrived way too soon. Even though our time in Venice was cut short, the floating city still gave us a memorable start. And this is where one of our biggest Venice travel tips comes in. Pack light, because there's a good chance you'll be carrying luggage up and down stairs, over bridges, and through bumpy streets. Once we arrived at the Venice train station, we checked the timetable and headed toward our Italo high-speed train. Once we got on the train, this trip immediately started to feel different from our last time in Italy. No driving, no traffic, no figuring out where to park. We just had to get our luggage on board and settle in. For this ride, we were in the Prima business class. We had booked extra magic tickets in advance at a really good discount, so this ended up being a comfortable way to take the longest train ride of the trip without paying full business class prices. The seats had plenty of space, the train was quiet, and once we settled in, it was a relaxing 5.5-hour journey from Venice to Naples. They handed out free drinks and snacks in business class, and since this train stopped in Florence and Rome before continuing to Naples, we ended up getting multiple goodies along the way. By the time we arrived in Naples, the shift was immediate. The second we walked out of the train station, it felt like we were in a completely different Italy. Venice had been quiet, peaceful, and calm. Naples was loud, gritty, and full of energy right away. You could feel it in the traffic, the people, the sounds, and just the pace of everything around us. We walked from the station towards our vacation rental, and almost immediately knew this was going to be a very different stay. Our apartment had a balcony overlooking the street, a pretty clear sign it was going to be noisy at night, and it was. That first night, we headed out to find pizza. Our rental hosts had recommended a pizzeria nearby, so we walked over to check it out. After the long train ride, sitting down to our first Neapolitan pizzas felt like the perfect way to arrive. The next morning, we made our way to a bakery known for its famous shell-shaped pastry called something I cannot pronounce. The shell was super flaky, and the inside had this slightly sweet ricotta filling, and it was one of those bites where you immediately understand why it's a must-try food item in Naples. After our morning treat, we headed to the train station to start our day of exploring. Before getting on the train, we went upstairs to the food court to grab a sandwich for the ride, which would become a routine for us. Anytime we had a train day, we planned time to get food at the train station. From there, we made our way to the section of the station for local trains and bought tickets to Pompeii. Pompeii is one of those places that's hard to fully wrap your head around until you're standing there. You're walking through this ancient city that was frozen in time. There are streets, homes, courtyards, shops, and details that make the whole place feel less like ruins and more like a city people had just stepped away from. And that's what makes Pompeii so special. It's not just the age of it, it's how much of everyday life you can still experience here. Walking through the streets, it's easy to picture people buying food, gathering with friends, working and living their normal lives, all before everything changed in a single moment. After spending a few hours in Pompeii, we made our way back to the train station and continued on to Sorrento. This was just a quick visit, but it gave us a little taste of the coast and a totally different feel from Naples. Our dinner in Sorrento was the perfect way to wrap up an amazing day exploring the sights. The next day, we stayed in the city and explored it on foot. No plans, just walking around, getting a feel for the neighborhoods, the streets, the traffic, the buildings, and the energy of the whole city. Naples wasn't our favorite city, but it was a great base to explore Pompeii and Sorrento, which we loved. The next morning, it was time to move on again. This time, we were getting on another high-speed train, heading north to Florence, one of our favorite cities in Italy. The ride was a nice reset from the intensity of Naples. We got off the train in Florence and made our way across the Arno River towards our rental, and almost immediately, everything felt calmer. Our vacation rental here was a cozy apartment and we settled right in. We enjoyed a delicious meal across the street from our apartment, then spent the rest of the evening exploring Florence on foot. The bridge, the lights, the river, the buildings. It has a softer feel to it that made us instantly happy to be back. The next morning, we decided to take a walk around the city and spotted a camper van parked outside the local grocery store. After our first trip to Italy in a camper van, seeing one parked in Florence was a funny reminder of how different this trip was. On our last trip, the van was our apartment on wheels, and it was a very small space. This time, the rentals gave us a completely different kind of home base. We had more room, comfortable beds, a kitchen where we could make a meal, and space to actually unpack. Plus, we didn't have to think about dumping tanks, filling up fresh water, checking the battery, or any of the other things that come with traveling by RV. While the RV was fun, we really appreciated this way of adventuring through Italy. One interesting thing that caught our attention, the trash pickup system. A lot of the trash containers here are actually underground, and the truck uses a crane to lift the whole container out, empty it, and then lower it back down. It's one of those random everyday differences that we find interesting when we travel. From our day trip in Florence, we headed to the train station to buy tickets to Pisa. One important tip here, if you buy a physical regional train ticket, make sure you validate it before getting on the train. There are little machines at the station and you need to stamp the ticket before boarding. It's an easy thing to miss, especially if you're used to buying digital tickets. In Pisa, we made our way into town and eventually towards the Leaning Tower. I'll be honest, the tower was more impressive in person than I expected. You see photos of it your whole life, so part of you thinks, okay, I know what this looks like, but standing there and seeing the tower actually leaning that much is pretty wild. Plus, you see all the intricate details that went into building the tower itself. We walked around to see it from different angles, and that's when you really notice how different it looks depending on where you're standing. One practical note from this stop, the public restrooms here were €1 and they accepted credit cards. But in general, when you're traveling around Italy, it's a good idea to have some coins or small bills with you because many restrooms only accept cash. Having to pay to use the toilet is pretty common, and you don't want to be caught off guard when you need one. After Pisa, we continued on to Lucca. Once there, we made our way towards the old city walls. Lucca ended up being one of those places that felt quieter and more relaxed right away. The historic center is surrounded by these massive walls, and walking through them into town felt like stepping into a much calmer part of Tuscany. We wandered through the street, took in the views, and eventually made our way to the tower with the trees growing on top. Lucca was a nice contrast to Pisa. Pisa had the big landmark and the crowds around it. Lucca felt more like a place just to walk, explore, and enjoy. Once night fell, we rode the 90-minute train back to Florence. The more time we spend in Florence, the more we're reminded why it's become one of our favorite cities in Italy, and a big part of that is the food. From the delicious breakfast pastries that Kate would pick up from the bakery down the street, to the various types of specialty sandwich shops we would try on our walks around the city, including this whole roasted pork sandwich, to a local cafe that became our favorite place to eat on the entire trip. And then there was the gelato. I'm pretty sure Kate averaged at least one gelato a day, which feels completely reasonable when you're in Italy. And I may have joined her for one or two during the trip. Florence just has a way of slowing everything down. After the intensity of Naples and the rushed start in Venice, it gave us a little breathing room. We crossed the Arno one last time and made our way back to the train station. This would be our last high-speed train in Italy. Once again, we were in prima business class, using extra magic tickets we had purchased in advance, which made the ride more comfortable without paying full price. It's worth pointing out that the extra magic tickets we booked were non-refundable and changes were not allowed. For this ride, we paid less than €50 for 2 business class tickets with seat selections. Same day tickets were more than double what we paid, so for us, booking in advance was worth it. Unlike previous train rides, this one was completely full. The train ride from Florence to Roma Termini was less than 2 hours, and arriving in Rome marked the end of this adventure and the start of the next. So we'll pick things up there in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give us a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you for the next video in our cruise across the Mediterranean.